of the Gaggle where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. It is now time for the weekly joint live stream, the Monday morning quarterbacking on the Gaggle. And so, and as you can see, I'm sure to Gaggler's great happiness, Peter was able to join this Monday. Wasn't able to join last Monday, so at least for the time being, we've resolved the technical issues. So you're on Rumble, and let's just hope that this.
Yeah, I'm on Rumble, but it's banned in Russia. So talk about this is Star Trek for me. I made it. Okay.
So Ahmadovich says, "I hope Peter used reliable VPN." I don't know what it was you used.
I'm using a VPN that is almost like magic. I mean, I have a VPN on my phone, which is about 65% reliable. The one on my iPad, it just never dies. I mean, I can leave it on all day. So I don't want to jinx it.
No jinxing here. And so anyway, a couple of things to discuss. One of which is that we're still in the will he, won't he phase of Iran, and nobody exactly knows what's going on with Trump. In fact, it's almost exhausting following the sort of the ins and outs of Trump. But this was Trump yesterday, I think, when he was asked about Iran. And as usual, he kind of gave a fairly non-committal answer. So let's just watch what he said.
Sir, on Iran, the Supreme Leader today said that U.S. attack could spark a regional war. Give you response to that, sir?
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course you can say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
Okay, so if we don't make a deal, we'll find out or not whether he's right, because what he's saying is he was quoting the Supreme Leader, Khamenei, who said that, if you attack us, this is going to be a regional war. Now, we're still in this phase that we're talking about this deal, and we don't really understand what the parameters of this deal are, because we talked about the claim in the New York Times, but they didn't have it on any authority from anyone in the administration. Trump wants an end to nuclear enrichment. He wants an end to basically just the ending of all the ballistic missiles programs, and presumably destruction of all the current ballistic missiles, and then of course no more sponsorship of the proxies in the region. Now, it seems like the nuclear enrichment would be hard enough to get Iran to accept that. But the elimination of the ballistic missiles, I don't see how any Iranian government could possibly accept anything like that. Okay, the proxies I think aren't really that significant, but the ballistic missiles I think are very significant.
Well, I mean, negotiations, that's code for we're waiting for your surrender.
Yes, that's right.
And there is no reason why Iran, particularly in the wake of the 12-day war, would even consider that. And with the rhetoric coming out of Tehran, it's just basically make my day, your move.
Right. Well, I actually think Iran would go out of its way to avoid a war. I mean, I really don't think that.
I mean, George, but you just gave the parameters. I mean, those
right.
are
No,
all
that, if you put that on the table, I don't see how any Iranian government could possibly accept a deal like that. But what I'm puzzled about, though, is this Arakchi. He seems to be talking about that we're kind of close to a deal. And then that's what I find difficult. So if you just watch, he gave this interview to CNN over the weekend, and just watch how um, he discusses this. So let's just watch this.
So I'm not concerned about war. What I'm concerned of is miscalculations and military operation based on misinformation and disinformation campaigns. It is obvious to us that there are certain elements, certain parties who want to drag President Trump into this war for their own benefits. And I think President Trump is wise enough to make a correct decision.
How can a meaningful negotiations process be jump-started right now?
A meaningful negotiation should be based on trust. And unfortunately, we have lost our trust to the United States as a negotiating partner. We need to overcome this mistrust. There are now some intermediators, some friendly countries in the region who are trying to build this confidence. It is difficult, but they are trying. So I see the possibility of another talk if the US negotiation team follows what President Trump said, to come to a fair and equitable deal to ensure that there is no nuclear weapons.
So if this confidence is built, if you get to that stage, you are ready and willing to sit down directly with the American side, with someone like Witkoff, and talk.
The question of directly and indirectly is something else. That is the form of negotiation. And we have to.
But that's what they say they want. That.
Yes, but we have to take care of the substance of negotiation, and that is more important.
Yeah, and President Trump says that negotiations are already going on. He has said overnight that there is negotiations taking place. How does that work right now with this confidence building, with countries in the region also helping?
That is through intermediators. As I said, there are some countries who convey messages and who are trying to build confidence and to prepare the ground for a meaningful negotiation. And we're working with them. And we are exchanging messages.
Would you say that these talks that are going on right now are fruitful and can lead to a de-escalation of the situation to a point where real talks can take place?
I think so far, yes, fruitful.
Things like enrichment, things like ballistic missiles, things like proxy forces in the region. I know that the United States has talked about wanting to negotiate about that as well. Is that complete?
CNN had mildly intelligent people still working for them. These
Right.
are a good question.
Yes, exactly.
Talk about.
President Trump said no nuclear weapons, and we fully agree with that. That could be a very good deal. Of course, in return, we expect sanction lifting. So that deal is possible. Let's do not talk about impossible things.
What do you think the concept?
All right. So, when you listen to that, you'll find it very strange because he seems, it's negotiations taking place. President Trump, very reasonable. I think hope he's commonsensical. Stops listening to all the bad people around him, and then said, we can work something out because of President Trump. President Trump has said no nuclear weapons. Now the problem is that that's what Trump said before. And the Iran said, yeah, fine, that's good enough. We can absolutely agree on that. No nuclear weapons. But then Trump seems to mean something else entirely when he says no nuclear weapons. So that's why we have all this when we're going through exactly the same thing, which is okay, no nuclear weapons. Okay, you don't have an argument with us on that. But then the question, okay, what about nuclear enrichment?
Yeah, but the train already. Well, he's very diplomatic. I mean, he's very skilled, okay? And you have to parse all these words. No nuclear weapons, no nuclear program, no enrichment, okay? These are all connected. But I think the train has already left the station, at least for Trump. I mean, Trump has, drawn a line in the sand, and Iran is not moved by it, okay? I mean, so it's, the Iranians have every incentive and advantage to talk. Trump doesn't. And so, he's boxed himself in. And I don't know how he unboxes himself, George. I mean, it's been resolved. How has it been resolved? We have a win. I've won. What does that mean?
Well, it's going to be very difficult now.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult.
It is going to be difficult because, but Trump, hasn't said these are my conditions: zero nuclear enrichment, zero ballistic missiles, zero support for proxies in the region. He hasn't said that. That was others reporting what the U.S. demand is, but that is, and no one has said. Trump says no nuclear weapons. He's always said that. That's all he said. No nuclear weapons. He said that before the bombing in last June. No nuclear weapons. But he has never said zero nuclear enrichment. Maybe that's what he means. I mean, it's possible he said it, but he's never said that that's what I mean by no nuclear weapons, which meaning that zero enrichment and zero ballistic missiles. So that's what makes this. I mean, in a way, it's baffling, really. What are they talking about? But in a way, it also gives Trump a way out because it's that. Well, I've never said zero enrichment. That's others are saying that. So well, we're going to make a deal. We're going to sit down the table. If we don't do a deal, but then a deal about what? Well, no
about
nuclear,
what?
no nuclear weapons.
See,
They've already agreed to no nuclear weapons.
That's why he's boxed himself in because it's what is the deal? A deal to avoid war. Okay, how do we avoid war? I mean, you have to ask the right questions to get the right answer, and he's very vague about it. Okay, and I think much to his detriment. Yeah, it may give him an escape, but he's not going to look good, George. I mean, you
Right.
assemble this entire flotilla, this armada. I mean, putting the entire region on eggshells, and you meant what?
Right. Right.
And this sends a signal to America's Gulf allies: is there a decision maker or is there an indecisive maker in the White House? That's why I said boxed in. I don't see how he gets himself out without humiliating himself. Because when you use this highfalutin superlative rhetoric, you face humiliation. If you're calibrated and you're careful and you're very specific in your language, that's another thing. But that's not the case here.
But in a way, because he hasn't specified exactly what he means, he does have a way of getting out. And now I can say, oh well, it's a humiliation. Okay, no more than
Okay, all right. Let me amend that. Good point. Let me amend that. If, given what we heard from the foreign minister, Trump announces negotiations, but in a way that isn't just another kabuki theater that we saw last year. I mean, if Trump can say we have a diplomatic breakthrough, we've used Oman, for example, and we're going to have these negotiations, either going to be the terms a little bit more specific. Maybe that's the escape hatch. Okay, but as you and I have said so many times, that this is the ultimate prize for Israel's project for the Middle East. And we're just that far away. That's what the goal. This is something they've been salivating for decades and decades. And
yes, okay,
this close.
Fine, but that's Israel's goal. Now you'd then have to say, well, is Trump going to embrace Israel's goal as America's goal? Maybe, but he may not. I mean, he's still quite a Trump. You have to keep in mind, Trump is still quite a cunning character. He's very, very devious in everything he does. So I don't think he's just going to embrace wholeheartedly Israel's goal any more than he did last June. I mean, he did limit himself to the strikes on the nuclear facilities. And then he kind of brought the whole thing to an end, which is in a way why it was surprising that he started this whole thing up again now.
Exactly.
But at the same time, he's issuing lots of threats, but that doesn't mean that he's actually going to carry them out, because the goals that he has now set himself are so vague. I mean, what he did last June was limited, and he said, okay, I accomplished this. what is he going to accomplish now? I mean, he could hit more. There's no question he could hit some targets. I mean, he could hit
Oh yeah,
targets
yeah.
in Iran. He can assassinate Iranian leaders. He can assassinate commanders and so on. He can do all that. That's not going to get him very far. Okay, then what? You're going to walk back. Iran's just going to say we're not going to negotiate. So that's right. Once you start bombing, we're not going to negotiate.
And,
So
well, of course. But what about?
as a kind of backup. Oh well, Iran has now agreed to sit down at the table.
Okay, well, what about my caveat of announcing some kind of negotiations? Because I see no other way out than that.
But I think he'd have to do that before he starts bombing. I think if he starts
Oh,
bombing,
but
Iran will say we're
obviously,
not negotiating.
obviously,
Yeah, that's right.
because once the first missile is fired,
Right.
who the hell knows what's going to happen? Okay,
Right.
totally unpredictable.
No, but the thing where I have doubts, you can say, oh, Trump was if he walks away, Trump is humiliated. Well, with Trump, we're always on to the next thing. Within 2 hours, we're on to the next Trump crisis.
But
Trump,
well, his plate's quite full right now.
his plate is full, and then we're on to Cuba, or maybe he sent out a truth attacking what was it, Timothy Noah, or whatever, the guy who that stand-up comedian. That's where he truths out. We're always on to the next thing with Trump, and then we kind of forget the previous crisis, and because we're on to the next crisis. So just as with Greenland, we were heading for the crisis, and then he kind of walked away, and then we've kind of forgotten about Greenland. But he could start that up at any time. I mean, he could again, because there's no deal. It's not like he signed a deal with Denmark or with NATO on Greenland. It's just there, hanging there as something that
Well,
he could revive whenever he feels like it.
well, I mean, doesn't it have a kind of an accumulative effect? I mean, who the hell is Donald Trump and what is he doing? Okay, he's hot and heavy on this, and then okay, let's send the trip because those the flotilla or armada, whatever word you want, it can't stay there forever. Okay, I mean it's going to run out of whatever keeps
Right.
these huge ships going. You're going to have to
Right.
go have a port of call at some point here. Okay, so
Right.
and again, what is the reliability and predictability? And we can go through this again. I mean, as we both agree, I mean, because of the vagueness of the terms, I mean, how are we supposed to react? Okay, so I don't think there's an easy way out for him. I certainly hope he doesn't attack. Okay, I really hope he doesn't do
Right.
that. And just for the for regional stability, I mean, if there's an exit for him, say we'll have talks in Oman, I'd applaud it. I really, okay. I mean, I don't think it's a great look
Well,
for
that's
him,
right. But
but
then
I mean, I think that's an
what
acceptable
about
outcome.
one way out is, hey, a summit between Trump and Khamenei. I don't know how mobile Khamenei is. He's 86, but hey, we've arranged a summit meeting between Trump and Khamenei.
Yeah,
That would go
do you
weird.
think the Iranians are interested in that, George? I mean, after the
If-
12-day war,
I do think they are very cautious people, and they will do anything
yes,
to avoid
yes,
an armed
but
conflict.
they have been doing that, and what are the results?
That's very true, and there's no question. I mean, but at the same time, they still think, well, what about the next time? We want to avoid the next strike. We don't. They just don't want to get hit by the United States. So I think
Yeah,
if
but I
that's
mean,
the price, a summit with Trump, and that's quite a coup for Iran. I mean, hey,
well,
with the president of the
Nixon
United
goes to
States.
China. Yeah, it's a Nixon go to China. I mean, I just the thing is that with Trump, he creates expectations, and not meeting, even remotely meeting that expectation, does him damage. Maybe a little bit. And like you're absolutely right. I mean, who knows what we're going to be talking about on Wednesday?
Right, exactly. But see, with remember how he did that with during his first term when he had that whole thing with North Korea, and it seemed like he was
Yeah.
about to hit North Korea, and then lo and behold, he organizes a summit with Kim Jong Un. Now the summits didn't really amount to much. He had 3 summits, They didn't really lead anywhere. But nonetheless, it was a big media spectacle, and it was an expectation, though the expectations were never met. And Trump seems to have lost interest in the whole the subject of North Korea. But I could see that if he organizes a summit with Khamenei, I think the Iranians would absolutely go for it. The only people who wouldn't like it would be the Israelis. But Trump can tell them, tough. We're going to do it. This is and it's a way to climb down on all sides. So I don't know.
I'm still here. You're still here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's a way to do it, and that would be a way out. I think that there's all sorts of ways to climb down, and even if they work out a deal that you say, yeah, but that's a deal that he could have got, a year ago, whatever. Who cares? As long as you've got a deal. I mean, people always release.
Yeah, but the optics of it, he blinked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, because he didn't go through all this song and dance to get a meeting.
Right. No, he didn't. But
no, I mean, the fact is, George.
Yes, that he blinked. I mean, that's the point. It's like, okay, he blinked.
Well, I mean, it looks like, considering what we understand where he gets his intelligence from, he gets it from Israeli intelligence. I mean, the mainstream media openly talks about that. We've had high-ranking Israelis over the last few days visiting Washington or Mar-a-Lago. I think it's Mar-a-Lago, and telling them what they think options are, and Trump, the riots that will loosen up everything, and then when the riots hit their peak, we're going to go in and have a decapitation regime change. Well, it didn't happen. Okay, and again,
Trump didn't do it. Trump didn't attack.
I presume Trump is thinking. You said this was all going to work out, and now it's not.
Right, but that's the thing. But that scenario, which obviously the Israeli intelligence was telling him, which is that attack. This is the time to attack. This is when they're vulnerable. Trump didn't do it. He had the common sense, and which he has a lot of common sense not to do it. And I think that's what Arachi was referring to. I think Trump has a lot of common sense. He's not going to do anything crazy. And this plan that the Israelis do crazy things. The Israelis absolutely, hey, let's just bomb. Let's just kill as many people as possible and then destroy as much as possible and say this is fantastic. And then we're going to do it again in 6 months' time. I don't think that appeals to Trump. I mean, I don't think that's going to do the job for him. And he's never really done that before. I mean, when he uses force, it's usually for very limited ends. I mean, he's not really looking for some grand solution to all our problems the way Israel may be looking for. So he said, well, I'll do a limited strike, and then I'll say this is a fantastic victory.
But the however he exits from this, Iran has demonstrated its deterrence capability. That's a major victory for Iran. A major victory.
Right. Yes, it's a victory, but that's with the United States. But it's only because the United States has chosen to escalate, and which it hadn't done before. So it chose to escalate, and then now it decides, to walk away. But Iran is still going to have the problem with Israel, because Israel isn't just going to sit on its hands and
no way
accept it, and that's why. Whereas a summit with Khamenei sounds like a good idea. I think to me it sounds like a good idea. Israel would be absolutely beside itself with fury at anything like that. So that's why
it would be legitimizing
the going to happen. But it's a way for them to get out of it.
A meeting would be legitimizing the Islamic Republic of Iran. That's the last thing the Israelis want.
Right.
Because Israel doesn't want to have it doesn't want a weakened Iran. Okay, it wants no Iran. That's what it wants. And plus, the timing is very important. Now, I don't want to make the midterms a holy grail, because it could get cut both ways. I mean, Trump, the Republicans get slaughtered, a shellacking, as what Obama would say, and then he'll become all the more reason a foreign policy president. Okay. Leaving his mark. So I mean, it can cut both ways. Okay, he'll be besieged at home, which he'll have more freedom in foreign policy. I mean, it's not as if anything Congress means anything to him. Okay,
No,
so
no.
but I mean, but the rule of thumb is, and I'm going to stick with it, but I'm not going to turn it into holy grail. Is that the Israelis are going to be looking at November. So we're in February and we have November. That's the window. And that's a common sense approach, okay? Without, like I said, making the midterms a holy grail.
But the problem for Israel is that it can't undertake any kind of an operation against Iran without the United States in its corner. So if, they can attempt to exert all their influence, which is what they do, but if Trump becomes obdurate and refuses to go down this path because he senses this is not going to end well. This is just going to destabilize the region. This is going to be inconclusive. People are going to get killed, and it's just going to be a horrific mess. No real benefits for the United States. The only possible benefits are for Israel. I think Trump is going to stay away from it. I mean, I think Trump is not an Israel first person. He does, yeah. He listens to donors and all those, Adelsons and others. He listens to them. They give him money, but on the other hand, he's not going to get himself into a horrific war for Miriam Adelson.
I'm glad you said that, George. Yes, Adelson plays a role in his calculus, but the other impactful people on him are the other rich people.
Yeah.
Okay, in Qatar, in Kuwait, in Saudi Arabia, they count a lot more than I think people, and much to the chagrin of the Israelis.
Yeah, I agree. That's what kind of makes me think that he's not going to go through with this. I mean, it's like, then maybe I'm going to be wrong, but I just think that there's so few benefits for him and so many potential painful consequences for him that it makes little sense for him to do this. He did a limited strike last June. This is not going to be a limited strike. This will be kind of a vague, all-encompassing attack without any proper explanation. What's he going to tell the American people? Why am I doing this? What's the explanation?
And on top of it, George, I mean, as skeptical, at least I am, of this board of peace. I mean, that's just going to be dead in the water if a conflict starts. I mean, we're going to say, you're supposed to be the chairman of the board of peace and not the commander in chief of war. Okay, right. I mean, there's no way you can spin that one. That's a fool's.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll see what how he goes about this. I mean, I tend to think, but who knows with these things how they go. So the other thing that we generally, in fact, we make it a policy that we don't talk about Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, that's just been our policy and so on. However, there was a kind of an interesting aspect to the whole Jeffrey Epstein saga.
Well, if I could interject real quick, George. I mean, George and I are probably the only two people that didn't know Jeffrey Epstein.
That's right. We were not invited to Lolita Island, and we were not invited to go aboard the Lolita Express, and no one offered us any money. I mean, at least no one offered me any money. But anyway, the reason why it might be worth just addressing the Jeffrey Epstein issue is that there's a new meme that has been introduced into the public discourse. I mean, I was waiting for this to show up, but now it's out there, which is that Jeffrey Epstein was, of course, working for Putin. He was working for the Russians. So all the talk about how it was Mossad, the CIA, no, no. It was Putin all along. And so you wonder. Some of this material I think is clearly coming from Hodorkovsky. I think he's the one who's been introducing this notion that Epstein was working for Russia. But the Daily
Well,
Mail. Yeah,
can you quickly explain who Hodorkovsky is?
yeah, Hodorkovsky was this crooked businessman. He who exploited the ridiculous privatization scheme that was run by in the early Yeltsin days. The privatization scheme was that somehow everybody got shares in the public enterprises. And so hey, we privatized it. All the Russian people, and they now have they own all shares in all these industries. But of course, once people realize that that they've got meaningless bits of paper in their hands, unscrupulous characters like Hodorkovsky came along, bought up all. They bought up these papers. They paid almost nothing for these shares, and lo and behold, they became owners of these huge Soviet state enterprises. So it was a total scam, an absolute scam. This whole the privatization. So Hodorkovsky became very, very rich, and then there was this whole UCOS thing, and became one of the richest men in Russia until Putin kind of early on in his administration decided to crack down on these these oligarchs, and then he went to prison, and he was released as a goodwill gesture by Putin on the eve of the Sochi Winter Olympics, and of course, as often happens, in fact always happens, no good deed goes unpunished. Hodorkovsky went to the West and began to finance and sponsor all sorts of anti-Russian activities. So much of what we hear from about the evils of Russia and so on is financed either by Hodorkovsky or is sponsored by Bill Browder. I don't know how much Bill Browder finances. Hodorkovsky does finance stuff, but Bill Browder, then it's always this kind of this double act between Hodorkovsky and Browder, and when they talk about Russia. So Hodorkovsky, he runs various outfits, and they feed.
It's like the Russia Institute or something, Russia Enterprise,
something like
I
that.
don't
It's also
remember.
called the dossier, something like some dossier that he finances, and so they put out a lot of stuff. For instance, I mean that this is Browder. Browder's the one who came up with this idea that Putin is worth, I don't know, $200 billion. He just sort of plucked a number out of the air, and then the media report this. Well, Putin is believed to be worth $200 billion. And then well, what's the source of this story? And it's invariably Bill Browder. But so Hodorkovsky has been fueling the story that somehow Jeffrey Epstein was linked to the Kremlin. But the Daily Mail, the UK, one of these awful UK publications, ran. Let's just look at this headline, and this Epstein's sex empire was, quote, KGB honey trap. Pedophile financier had multiple talks with Putin after conviction, with Russian girls flown in to harvest compromise on world-famous figures. Now, what's interesting, as we'll go through the story because the story itself is interesting. All of these allegations that they put there, no evidence for any of them. As you read the story, you don't have any evidence for any of these claims. Leave aside the KGB, which hasn't existed since 1991. So, I mean, I don't know where he got but I guess they had to. The headline writers, I guess, had to go with that because they know, well, that's what British readers would know. Well, they know about the KGB. You tell them FSB, they wouldn't know what you're talking about. So they had to go with, the KGB. Oh, we remember them. We watched all those movies. You still see them on the telly. But anyway, here is then the the story, and here's the Jeffrey Epstein was running, quote, the world's largest honey trap operation on behalf of the KGB when he procured women for his network of associates. Intelligence sources believe. Oh, well, if it's intelligence sources believe this, then we have to accept their words for it. The release of more than 3 million new documents relating to the late sex offender gives credence to incendiary claims made by senior security officials that Epstein was working on behalf of Moscow and possibly Israel, possibly. And when he facilitated assignations for some of the world's most powerful men. And then you think, well, great, fantastic. Where's your evidence for this? The files include 1,056 documents naming Russian President Vladimir Putin and 9,629 referring to Moscow. And I think, well, what does that mean, naming? Just people randomly. I mean, you can go through our podcasts. I don't know how many times we mentioned Putin. So that's, I mean, it just doesn't mean anything. But by saying 1,056, that would suggest that he was in regular contact with. Oh yeah. Let's do brunch sometime. Epstein even seems to have secured audiences with Putin after his 2008 conviction for procuring a child for prostitution. Now, that word "seems" is doing a lot of work there, as we'll see, because you don't know.
It's doing a lot of
an audience with Putin.
It's doing that word "seems." It's doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Exactly. But you see, when you write these things, people don't notice words like "seems." They just read, "Oh yeah, Epstein secured audiences with Putin."
This is what passes for journalism, everyone.
Exactly. The sources say it could explain. Could, again, you always know when when you come across words like "could" and "would," that they're going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting. The sources say it could explain why Epstein appeared to enjoy an ultra-wealthy lifestyle out of kilter with his career as a financier.
So he got his money from Russia.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's the implication. But then it says, here's something that they throw in at the end of a sentence. Although there's no documentary evidence linking Putin and his spies directly to Epstein's illicit activities. So I have to throw that in because otherwise, they're going to look.
What paragraph? What
this
paragraph
is
number?
Way down. I mean, it's about the 5th, 6th paragraph of the story. So no documentary evidence linking Putin and his spies directly to Epstein's illicit activities. Any activities, illicit or illicit, I mean, anything. But the sources also claim, who are these sources? Also claim that while U.S. security services monitored Epstein's Russian connections for years, their UK equivalents were hesitant due to Epstein's connections to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. And then the cache includes an email claiming Bill Gates asked one of Epstein's advisors to provide medicine to treat sexually transmitted diseases due to sex with Russian girls. Something he dismissed as completely false. But you see, and then it says it also contains a document confirming the Mail on Sunday's October report that Epstein offered to introduce Andrew to a, quote, beautiful 26-year-old Russian woman in 2010, 2 years after Epstein's conviction. Now, what's very interesting is they're talking here about Russian women. So the moment you say Russian, that means Putin. So therefore, these Russian were obviously they're working for Putin. I mean, it's like, well, obviously he's responsible for any Russian women who Epstein knew and was whatever facilitated their visa application.
Well, George, before COVID, I haven't done a lot of travel since COVID, and then everybody knows about my eye issues. But before COVID, when I would travel, and I traveled extensively, I'd go to the airport, one of the three major airports in Moscow, and what did you see? You saw a lot of very young, beautiful women with those little, what do you call those, roller suitcases? I don't know, like a trolley,
Oh yeah, the
and
little
they
trolls,
were just ubiquitous. Where are you going? I'm going to Dubai. I'm going to New York. I have a hard time believing that this was a FSB operation. Okay, these are these dating sites and all of this, ubiquitous.
yeah.
Okay, and I felt kind of sad, but that was what was happening at the time. But when a Russian girl is with a trolley and has a plane ticket, she's AGB. Really? Wow, you have a vivid imagination.
But it's so instructive. I mean, that's why it's worth looking at. That when they have these media stories, and the moment you only need to mention that they're Russian. Oh, it's a Russian woman. That means somehow Putin's involved. Apparently, Putin is responsible for whatever any Russian is doing anywhere. Um, just like
Yeah,
Putin is responsible for anything, whatever that happens anywhere in Russia. Somebody gets knocked over by a car.
yeah.
Somehow Putin is involved in that.
It's extraordinary. This is always the portrait that is presented to Western audiences, that everything in Russia is monolithic. Well, I very rarely like to invoke, well, I live here. It is hardly monolithic. Okay, there are times you wonder. It's just that it's organized chaos. That's how we get through the day. Okay,
Yeah.
so nothing monolithic about it all. And people can travel. I mean, if you get a Western visa, Russian authorities are not going to stop you. Just can go. I mean,
Well, that's and I think this is.
they think that this is still.
But this is why I think it's also very significant. We're talking about things that happened many years ago now. This is, 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11. It wasn't that difficult for Russians to get visas to travel. I mean,
Not at all.
it was difficult. It was harder for them than for Russians than others, but it was still difficult. You had to prove a lot of things that you were, that you had money and a place to go and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. So that's why, particularly when it's Europe, that's why everybody, you want to go to France, you want to go to Italy, you go to the Italian visa center. You know why? They don't care much about the paperwork. They just want the money.
Right,
Okay, and everybody knows that in Moscow. Okay,
right, right.
again, but it all came to a halt with the COVID, and then obviously the conflict in Ukraine. But before that, just go to the Italian visa service.
Yeah,
They'll give it to you. They'll give it to you in a day. Just have the
right,
cash.
right. But
It's common knowledge.
that's right. Anyway, the mail story goes on because you keep waiting. Okay, well,
Oh,
you
George, you just keep giving. This is a gift that keeps on giving. Yeah.
gift that keeps on giving. Exactly. So here's the you think. Well, okay, well, we're looking forward to some evidence for for these claims. It says U.S. security officials also believe Epstein had long-standing ties with Russian organized crime, who could have been blackmailing him. Could have been blackmailing him. Um, that could explain the ease with which
You mean
Epstein.
someone was blackmailing Epstein?
That's right. Exactly. It's getting
Oh,
quite complicated
there's a twist there.
now. That's right. But having introduced the Russians, they have to say, you can't really have Epstein blackmailing the Russians. So obviously, the Russians are blackmailing him. So that could explain the.
I'm sorry, George. If this is a script that you want to sell to Netflix, I'm sorry they're going to turn you down. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so that could explain the ease with which Epstein appeared to be able to fly girls in from Russia. Well, I think you've just explained, how you fly girls in from Russia. I don't think you need organized crime to get Russian girls to fly in to New York. A source said, quote, you have Andrew, Bill Gates, Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, and the rest placed in compromising position on an island bristling with technology. It's the world's largest honey trap operation. Well, whoever said this, the source said, doesn't know what they're talking about because most of those people were never on the island. So, you're throwing around accusations Trump has explicitly stated many times he's never been on the island, never been on. I think he's been on the Express, but he's never been on the island. So you're throwing around this stuff. I don't know whether Bill Clinton was there. I think Bill Clinton's also denied he was ever on the island. So that's
I'm the last person on earth to defend Bill Clinton. Believe me. He was on the plane 26 times. Yeah, he went on an overseas trip with
right.
Epstein to Africa, and they had 26 flights during
That's
that
right.
journey.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm not defending, but 26 that makes it, from A to B 26 times. No, it was A, B, C, D, E.
Right. That's right. That's right.
I'm the last person to defend Bill Clinton. Okay, but
Right,
I mean, if you're going to make these accusations, just use a little bit of common sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then it says, in a startling email sent to Epstein on September the 11th, 2011, an unidentified associate, that's helpful, unidentified associate, discusses an appointment with Putin during a forthcoming trip to Russia. The individual tells Epstein, spoke with Igor. He said, last time you were in Palm Beach, you told him you had an appointment with Putin on September the 16th, and that he could go ahead and book his ticket to Russia to arrive a few days before you. Now, just if you pass these words, so we have an unknown person. He writes to Epstein. He reports a conversation with Igor. Igor said to him, this unknown person, that you said to Igor, whenever, last time you were in Palm Beach, you told Igor, who's telling me, he's reporting this conversation, you told him you had an appointment with Putin on September the 16th, and that he could go ahead and book his ticket for Russia tour. I don't know why anything depends on this.
Well, George, I talked to Igor too, okay? And it was about you. And
Yes.
you have an appointment in the Kremlin in 3 weeks' time, because Igor said he set it up, okay? Come on,
That's right.
everybody. Absurd.
Well, and this is why it's so ridiculous. Everybody and his uncle claims to know Putin, know people who are close to Putin, and they can get to Putin, they can, make an appointment with Putin, whatever. It's nothing. It's the worst cliche in the world, that everybody's trying to palm themselves off as being frightfully important, and that they know lots of important people, and that they're in on the know. They know how to get to Putin. I can get to him. It's so ridiculous. Igor told you that you told him, Igor, that you had an appointment with Putin, and you had an appointment with he had an appointment with Putin.
You have a better chance of meeting Putin if you do a cold call to the Kremlin. Okay,
I agree. It kind of reminds you. Remember during RussiaGate, when we had that whole story about building a Trump Tower in the in Moscow, and that guy Michael Cohen decides, I'm going to call the Kremlin about building a Trump Tower in Moscow, and that'll put me in good with the boss. The boss is really going to help me. Then he calls the Kremlin, and Peskov, or whoever was, maybe I don't know, if it was Peskov, whoever worked for Peskov, told Cohen, well, I don't know, talk to the mayor's office. Building permits aren't being decided in the Kremlin. If you need a building permit, that you go to the mayor's office to get a building permit.
I think at the time it was Lushkov that was the mayor. You didn't even have to talk to the mayor. You had to talk to his wife. She's the one she was the mastermind behind his. I mean, let's say he was Mayor Daley of Chicago would be a big admirer of Lushkov. Let's put it that way.
That's right. And
his wife.
But it's an that also gave you an insight. The whole thing. So you have these people like Michael, and this was hell. Oh, that actually just shows how Trump and Putin, whatever. He said, here's this guy. He works for Trump. He has absolutely no idea for the elementary thing. I mean, as to who you get in touch with in order to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. So in the same way here, well, I can arrange a meeting, with Putin. But anyway, then. So that's that the Daily Mail thinks that this is dispositive. But okay, anyway, this goes on. It says Epstein appears to have had another meeting scheduled with Putin in 2014. In an email to Epstein, Japanese entrepreneur Joey Ito tells the pedophile that another US billionaire named Reid Hoffman, he's the co-founder of website LinkedIn, was unable to join. And it says, "Hey, Jeffrey," Ito writes, "I wasn't able to convince Reid to change his schedule to go meet Putin with you. It is unclear whether the meeting took place." I think it's pretty clear that it didn't take place. I mean, it's like
I don't know why. Why would Putin want to talk to any of these people?
That's exactly it.
He's got people to talk to people.
That's exactly the thought that I had, which is that's that's why you have a big office. They have the president has a big office. Lots of people work for him. There's all of these organizations have lots and lots of people there. Why would the president talk to whatever Reid Hoffman? Why would he need to if for whatever reason Reid Hoffman wants to do business in Russia?
Yeah, but why
would he need to talk to Putin?
But the president of the Russian Federation doesn't do those things.
No.
I mean, if it's bilateral with a oil company owned by another state, a state company.
Right.
Okay, well, he may be involved in that, because if it's involved with a state Russian oil company, then there may be maybe it's a signing ceremony or something like that. But putting up a building in Moscow, I mean, Putin doesn't even live in Moscow. I mean, he might go through and just say, "I didn't know that building was there." I can tell you, when he visited RT, he kept doing this. It was like, "Oh, okay," I mean, he had no idea.
Right.
And why would he?
No, that's right. Yeah. But I don't understand Reid Hoffman. Let's say Reid Hoffman wants to expand his business in Russia, his LinkedIn in Russia, I still don't see why he would need to talk to Putin for this.
He would have to talk to probably Yandex. That's Russia's version of Google or something. Okay.
Right. That's right.
But this shows just the gross ignorance.
Right.
And it seems, apparently, could, would. I mean, whoever wrote this has no idea what they're talking about.
No. But that's why
it's clickbait.
It's sort of clickbait, but it's more than that, because once
I mean, it's pernicious. Okay,
exactly.
Yeah,
because once you can get it out there, oh well, now the all of the mystery of Jeffrey Epstein is solved. All the questions about where he got his money, all that is solved. He of course got it from the Russians. The Russians somehow passed all this money onto him, and then
the Russians got what out of it?
That I was going to say. And the next question is, well, what did they get out of this? Also,
so did Putin have Epstein killed? Is that part of the story too now? Come on,
I haven't that one, but that's yes. The other thing is, if you're working for the KGB or the FSB, the one thing you don't do, you don't have appointments with the president. I mean, that's kind of goes with the territory, which is, well, if you're working for
what you probably do
is
if you're a foreigner, let's say an American, you probably meet at a Denny's or a KFC. Okay,
right, yeah, because I'm thinking of the famous Soviet spies. They didn't go around. Well, I've got an appointment with Khrushchev. I've got to talk to him. It's just, Konon Molody or all those legendary Soviet spies. They didn't go and have a chat with Stalin. Have an audience with Stalin. Because it tends to blow your cover. I mean, if you have an appointment with the
with Armin Hammer, he had direct contact with Stalin. Armin Hammer
with Lenin, yeah.
With
Lenin. Armin Hammer was always a very odd character.
It was.
That's a mystery that's never really been solved. But he was always, the Soviet Union's favorite businessman. But strangely enough, he was never arrested in the United States. He was lived a long life and had contacts with the top levels of U.S.
Yeah,
government.
I think he was an American cutout. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
But though he was extremely sympathetic to the Soviet Union. I mean,
He
really.
was very sympathetic, and he came from a communist family, I think, and so he was there early on, and retained these all these business interests in the Soviet Union over there, even after they were all driven out from the Soviet Union after the end of the new economic policy. He somehow always had this favored state.
Well, yeah.
But he was also had good relations with President Nixon and everyone else. So he was, and there was never any question. You think, well, hey, why doesn't he get arrested for being a Soviet agent? No, he just glided through and lived into a very very ripe old age. I think I can't remember when he died, but he was I think well into his 90s by the time he died.
A real enigma. A real enigma.
Enigma. No one ever solved the mystery of Arm & Hammer. And here was the. But yeah, here's this big. It's just worth looking at. There's just the absurdity of this, because the story then was taken up in the Telegraph, and then it said, writing 3 days. They had a bad idea now after the plane crash. So this is why this meeting with Putin, alleged meeting, was cancelled. And then meanwhile, in the 2010 exchange regarding the former Duke of York, Epstein told Andrew that he has a, quote, friend who I think you might enjoy having dinner with. Ooh, friend. And then when pressed by Andrew for more detail, Epstein replied, she's 26, Russian, clever, beautiful, trustworthy, and yes, she has your email. And then the MOS previously revealed how this woman, a blue-eyed blonde, was not only abused by Epstein, but trafficked by him for many years, according to her legal representative. So he's procuring women, which is one of the ways he obviously exerted his influence with people. But where does the KGB come in? And in another email sent in November 2010, Epstein asks an individual whether he needs a Russian visa, adding, "I have a friend of Putin's. Should I ask him?"
Well, I have a friend too, George. I can get you a visa. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
No, because I have a friend. You got a visa. I mean, oh yeah, I got a visa, so I'm going to put in a call to Putin to get you a visa. That's going to get you far. I mean, imagine doing it in the United States. Somebody, I need to get a visa. Oh yeah, I have a friend, close to Trump. I'll get in touch with Trump. Trump will get you a visa.
Speed dial Marco for you right here.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's on my exactly. It's on my speed dial. Yeah, that's right. But it, I think it's the reason is it's kind of instructive, but how these stories are manufactured, and then it gets people will start accepting. Well, and that explains the great deal.
Russiagate will never die. Will
Yes.
never die.
No.
Because in fact, it was Epstein that was being blackmailed. Did you know? Yeah. That's the real story. Just watching, George and I just are not. We don't get involved in it, but just watching people just run. They're like on a treadmill, like gerbils, around and around and around. Okay,
that's right.
Go ahead, keep going.
Right. That's right. No, I think that we've exhausted that. A couple of articles. There was I do want to just highlight this very funny article that appeared on CNN the other day. What CNN was doing was saying, well, the CIA is setting up shop in Venezuela, which was kind of news, because everyone had assumed the CIA was already
already
actively
there.
involved. I mean, it's like, but the notion that they're somehow setting up shop that's the news. Wow, they're setting up shop. I'd assume that they had plum off there. So um, and but thing here in this story, which is this shock exclusive. It says the exclusive. The CIA is quietly working to establish a permanent U.S. presence on the ground in Venezuela, spearheading the Trump administration's plan to exert its newfound influence. And planning discussions between the CIA and State Department are centered around what the U.S. footprint inside Venezuela will look like. And then he goes on. Then CIA officers were on the ground in Venezuela in the months leading up to the operation targeting Maduro. So why do they need to set up office if they're already saying CIA officers were on the ground in
Why
Venezuela?
is the CIA the conduit? Wouldn't it be the State Department? Or I don't understand what is the CIA presumably is a clandestine operation. So this is not very clandestine; it's very overt. So I mean, and
Yeah.
if you're going to, the CIA is going to run Venezuela. Oh, okay.
Okay.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
No. No.
Their job is basically done.
Good. That's right. And then so in August, the agency had covertly installed a small team inside the country to track Maduro's patterns, locations, and movements, which helped bolster the operation earlier this month. And then the assets included a CIA source operating within the Venezuelan government. So you're already saying CIA was there; they were actively involved in the operation against Maduro. And then they say it remains to be seen how the Venezuelan people will respond to a more overt CIA presence in the country post Maduro. For years, Maduro cast the CIA as a convenient boogeyman, repeatedly accusing the agency, without evidence, of attempting to topple his regime as he clung to power despite US opposition. Without evidence? I mean, CNN puts in without evidence, which goes against its own story. They actually said the CIA was actively involved in Venezuela trying to overthrow him. And then they say, for years, Maduro cast the CIA as a convenient boogeyman, repeatedly accusing the agency, without evidence, of attempting to topple his regime. And then the next paragraph, now the CIA has helped supplant Maduro and is poised to help actively manage the Trump administration's dealing with Venezuela. So that's it. That's your news story.
Yeah, but that was a story written to reinforce the title.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But the bizarre thing is that they say, oh, without evidence. He says, there's no evidence at all. You've just cited your own story, cited the evidence the CIA was actively involved against Maduro. The one other thing that I wanted to bring bring up was that we sometimes cover the Alternative für Deutschland party and its leader, and its leader has raised the issue, which we've raised, but we're not Germans, we're not German citizens, but she raised the issue. Well, why isn't the German government doing more to press ahead with finding out what happened to Nord Stream, and indeed pressing ahead with getting some kind of compensation for the destruction of the pipelines? And
the lawsuits will never end. Okay.
No.
Because there has to be compensation, and
Yes.
For compensation to be given out, you need to have an investigation, a credible one. A lot of money is at stake here. A lot of money.
That's right. So the key here is, of course, because there's the insurance money that, but the insurance companies aren't going to pay if this was blown up in a terrorist operation. They'll pay if it was an accident, but not if it was deliberately destroyed. They're not going to pay there. So the German government is sort of, they want this to say, yeah, it was, blown up, by somebody, and so therefore, they want to save the insurance companies, billions and billions of payouts, but on the other hand, then they have to address the issue of, well, who actually blew it up, and so here is this the AFD leader, and so she was speaking, and just watch a little bit of what she says.
Und dann geht diese Bundesregierung noch
So she's saying here, and then this federal government goes there
dahin
and
und gibt keinen
doesn't give a
Rücksicht,
damn
wenn ihr
if you
durch einen Nachweis
through
durch
Ukrainian,
einen
with the help of
Ukrainer
foreign intelligence
mit Hilfe von
services,
ausländischen Geheimdiensten, man kann jetzt so
you
würfeln,
can
wer
now
das denn gewesen sein könnte,
die if we're
wenn
simply
uns
blown
die
away by the
Energieinfrastruktur
energy infrastructure Nord Stream.
einfach vor der Nase weggesprengt wird. Wie kann man da
How can you be quiet as a federal
als Bundesregierung
government?
leise sein?
The lack of supply of cheap natural
Die fehlende Zufuhr von günstigem Erdgas
gas
schädigt nicht nur
not only harms Germany,
Deutschland,
it harms
schädigt ganz Europa.
the whole of Europe,
Aber Deutschland
but
hat
Germany the most.
No lies detected.
No lies, exactly.
Well, I mean, she's speaking the obvious.
Yes,
I mean,
it is.
you know, George and I have had Germans on this program, and they're very skittish about talking. Very skittish. They're
Very
afraid.
skittish. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And there's,
Und wie kann man als Bundesregierung
and how can you have so little self-respect
so wenig Selbstachtung haben, dass
as a
man nicht
federal
mal für
government
Aufklärung
that you don't
sorgen
even worry
wird?
about
Ich kann
clarification?
Ihnen sagen,
I can
was
tell
wir
you
machen
what we will do
werden, wenn wir
if we have government
Regierungsverantwortung haben.
responsibility.
Wir
We will make demands.
werden Rückforderungen stellen. Dann sollen doch
Then the Ukrainians, the Zelenskys, should simply pay
die Ukrainer, der Zelensky, bezahlen dafür, dass
for
sie unsere
blowing up
Leitungen in die Luft
our
gesprengt
power
haben.
lines. Now,
What's wrong with that?
nothing.
It's common sense.
But
It's called it's called crime and punishment.
but it's a kind of common sense position. But of course, the Friedrich Merz, who just blathers on and on about Russia, and you say, according to your own investigators, it was Ukraine that blew up this pipeline. You said it was the Ukrainians, so why aren't you doing anything about it? Or at the very minimum, asking for compensation. I mean, say, hey, somebody's out of pocket, and therefore, since you blow up, property. You need to cough up some money in damage.
Yeah, well, Zelensky is not out of pocket.
Anyway, let's go to our locals board, and
Everybody, just for everyone to know, again, I'm doing this on my iPad. It's very, very difficult for me to read. The comments are very, very small. Okay.
Yes.
Here we go.
Yes,
Go ahead, George.
it's very, very small. Well, this is the people on our locals board. They're the ones who worry about the dogs in the winter. They know that these Moscow winters are brutal on dogs, and they worry about. They feel dissatisfied, depressed, unappreciated. Anyway, so Cynthia, a good friend Cynthia, asks a question, and Russia's relationships with both Assad and his successor al-Jilani highlight how purely pragmatic its foreign policy is. After Assad's 2025 fall, Moscow gave him refuge, then quickly built ties with al-Jilani to protect its Syrian bases and preserve regional influence. Alongside partnerships with Iran, Hezbollah, and even the Taliban, Russia treats allies as tools, not friends, valuing whoever helps counter U.S. power, manage security threats, and secure trade and energy routes. So, Peter, what do you think about
Well,
it?
I think
Jelani.
maybe a little harsh saying tools. Okay, for the most part, I agree with the gist of the observation. Is that okay? Giuliani, he's head of Syria. Okay, recognition does not mean legitimacy. Okay, and it's like Zelensky's head of the Kiev regime. Does he have legitimacy? Well, we can debate that. But is he running the regime? Yeah, he is. Okay, and so it is kind of very pragmatic. The same thing applies to the Taliban. The fact that the Russians talk with the Taliban means that they think they're legitimate. No, well, probably not. But who else are you going to talk to? Okay, and that's the approach right there. Yes, Russia has interest in the region. This guy, through outside intervention, the Americans, the Turks, and the Israelis, etc. Well, he's there. Okay,
Mm.
and that's the way it is.
Yeah, right. No, I think so. I mean, I guess the odd aspect of it is, of course, is that the relationship that Russia had was with the Assad dynasty. So it was with the Assad dynasty that Russia established its very close relationship with Syria. I mean, Syria was really one of its most loyal
Yes.
allies since 1970. I think 1970 is when they first signed their friendship treaty. So, the case of Giuliani, I think it's very unclear really what Russia's future is there, because I still have my doubts that Giuliani is going to allow Russia to stay,
I agree. I agree.
keep its bases there. So I think
But George, Giuliani and Syria are now Russia's enemies. Well, that's not necessary
no,
here.
I don't think they're enemies, and I think probably Giuliani is afraid of Israel, and
Yeah.
probably thinks it's
Probably afraid of everybody, and so
right. He probably
he's
thinks it's
reaching
worth
out
his
to the
while
Russians.
to at least keep some protection from Russia against Israel. So I mean, this is two visits to Russia really within a couple of months. So it was that's quite a number of visits. But given that I think he's really a tool of the Western powers, the United
Yeah.
States, Turkey, I find it hard to believe that there's going to be any long term Russian Syrian friendship with him in
Yeah,
power.
yeah, but then again, like I said, they're not enemies. Okay, so I
Yeah,
mean that I think that's a pragmatic view. Okay,
right.
I
No,
mean
I think that's right.
Assad, he didn't. I think that Assad wasn't always a very good faith actor when it came to Russia and to Iran, because they told him, you're very weak. You have to enforce these kinds of reforms and all that, and he refused to do it. And he was shopping around, trying to find some kind of understanding with the West, and so he burned all of his fingers. Okay, he wasn't a good leader. Okay, I'm sorry, but he wasn't.
Well, I think he wasn't going to, but I
He
think
wasn't his father. He
he
wasn't his
wasn't his
father.
father. But I think he was kind of weak. I mean,
Yeah,
ultimately, the decision was taken in 2018, and that was a joint decision by Syria and Russia not to drive out ISIS permanently. That was basically, I think that was the moment. 2018, they were obviously all set for an offensive, and they decided then to back away. And I think once you allowed
yeah,
ISIS to just grow in strength, then eventually you were going to pay the price. I mean, there's no way that
yeah.
you. So I think that was the moment. Anyway,
They had the they had
yeah,
the momentum. They had the
right,
momentum, and
right,
they
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
um,
that's right.
dropped the ball, as it were.
That's right. And so Cynthia goes on. One way for the EU to step back from Ukraine without losing face after what amounts to a Russian victory over Ukraine would be to openly acknowledge that the Nord Stream sabotage was an act of Ukrainian terrorism. That admission would give European governments political cover to repair relations with Russia and to restore access to affordable energy. Well, I mean, I
You,
think that
you know, it's a wonderful question, wonderful observation. The problem is we're not dealing with rational. The political elite of Europe is simply not rational. You're absolutely right. I have advocated similar things on this podcast. Okay, and um, but what it was, there's a Russian saying: you can't argue with stupid.
right, and I think that whenever this war ends, that's not going to end. That isn't going to end
Yeah, it's not going to
the
end.
war between Russia and Europe. I mean,
No, it's not.
this is very deep. This is very long standing.
No, and it'll
It's
give the
going to be
justification. It will give the justification to continue the
yeah.
conflict against
That's
Russia.
exactly
That will be the catalyzing reason. Or revenge.
right.
Russia has to pay for what it did. There's an entire mythology now coming into place, justifying um, uh, gutting social services, social welfare in Europe, putting it into arms, turning, developing a military-industrial complex,
Right.
and as you and I and Mark talked about on Sunday, a unifying principle. Russophobia is the unifying principle of the European Union now.
That's right. That's like that's right. And that's not going to end. I mean, it's just it's too deeply ingrained. There are in too many states, and that even in states that you would normally assume would be reasonably sensible, would be reasonably open to improving relations with Russia, like in Italy, like France, even they, the Russophobia and this obsession with keeping the war against Russia going, it's just it prevails. Look at the case of Maloney, and then even in France with the National Rally. The National Rally is more or less supportive of the war. They're not really opposing Macron's policy. So, so I don't see any
Yeah,
real
this is this kabuki theater. Oh, we oppose NATO and all that, but they don't oppose the war.
right. That's right.
It doesn't make any sense.
Right. Um, and then Cynthia goes on, and if Trump dismantles the U.S. EU security pact, Europe could go further and expose what many suspect: the U.S.-led sabotage of the energy pipeline, targeting not only Russia but Europe itself. That would shatter
Exactly.
the Atlantic order. Europe could abandon NATO and seek a new security bloc with Russia,
Yeah.
possibly China,
Again,
India.
the question is from a person that has advanced degrees in common sense. Okay, but it ain't going to happen. Okay, because this is one of the things on my program, and I've talked with George and others, is that the U.S. wants to weaken Europe and Russia both.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. So the result: NATO hollowed out, U.S. power weakened, and U.S.'s ability to underwrite Israel's dominance in the Middle East and influence Latin America sharply reduced. But that's the thing that Europe used to have a policy of being part of NATO, but at the same time saying, well, we have our own security interests, and our security interest is to have good relations with back then with the Soviet Union, and that was their argument against Washington, and and Americans were always furious about this. They called them the Euro wimps.
Especially the German Social Democrats.
Exactly. That's right. There was always the Euro wimps, the Euro communists, Euro liberals. They hated them. They hated because they were always saying, well, we gotta.
He's another Willy Brandt.
Willy
Another
Brandt,
one.
exactly. And then they extend that, even with Helmut Schmidt, even with Helmut Kohl, they didn't really trust Kohl. They thought Kohl was also a little too friendly with the Soviet Union. But that used to be the European position. From in the 60s, it was de Gaulle, and then from the 70s onwards, it was Brandt and Schmidt and Kohl. And so, but the Europeans that were pursuing a sensible policy, they say, look, we're not like the United States. We have to live with the Soviet Union, and it doesn't make sense for us to try to provoke a war with the Soviet Union, where we're gonna be the ones who get hurt much quicker than the United States would get hurt. So that was their position, and that is the sensible position. It always was the sensible position.
And the proof is in the pudding. That
Right.
position gave them access to cheap, reliable
Right.
energy.
That's right. That was it. And so, I think it was always obvious when the Cold War came to an end that the one thing the United States would not be happy with is the creation of a united Eurasian continent. We'd have, particularly German manufacturing and industrial power coupled with Russian raw materials. If you combine all that together, then you suddenly got a major economic block on your hands, and that would be a rival to the United States. So the United States will obviously
And
that.
and then you don't need NATO, George.
Then you don't need NATO. And at the end of the Cold War, that's more or less what we were all assuming. Well, that's the way it's going to go, and that will be the end of NATO. What's the point of having NATO? What's the point of mobilizing against Russia when Russia is our partner? And obviously, the United States wasn't going to tolerate this, and hence it moved step by steps to make sure this didn't happen. Expansion of NATO and everything, and they've succeeded. They've succeeded in mobilizing Europe against
Yes, they did.
and weakening Europe
Go back.
economically.
Go back to the first couple of years of Putin in power. What was he obsessed with? Germany. Germany, Germany, Germany. Obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, you got the impression he was dating Merkel. I mean, there was, I mean, he went there. He addressed the Bundestag. Merkel came to
In Germany,
Sochi.
yeah.
He frightened her with the dog. I don't believe the story at all, but it's just propaganda. No, he was obsessed with that,
Right.
and he was disappointed, grossly disappointed.
I think she made up that story. She made up the story. Putin knew that I was afraid of dogs, and he brought this dog there. I don't believe I don't believe for 1 minute that he thought that she was afraid of dogs. I mean, and therefore he sent the dog in. I mean, it's a gentle dog. I mean, you don't assume you assume people aren't going to be afraid of a gentle dog.
Do you think anyone in his security circle would allow the 1% possibility that a dog would attack someone, because it could attack Putin as well? No, come on, it doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. I think it just I mean, he did that with Bush, with the dog. Because Bush actually really liked dogs, but he did the same thing with Bush. He brought a dog out, and that was like it worked with Bush because Bush liked dogs, and that broke the ice. And I think probably Putin thought this would break the ice. Who doesn't like dogs? I mean, it's
Who
very
doesn't
difficult
like
to be afraid of dogs. Yeah. But you're right, and he kept up with Merkel for a long time, and I think in 2014, I think we were in agreement. I think Putin was very weak. I think on when Yanukovych was facing the Maidan, and he kind of joined Merkel in saying, "Well, this is time to de-escalate. We can't use violence. Is reprehensible on all sides. We must abjure violence." So, I mean, the right position should have been, the legitimate authorities can use violence, but not the rioters. But by joining Merkel, I think that worked to
and we know that
Maidan.
she lied about it. She
Yeah,
admitted it. Okay.
of course she did. Of course she
And
did.
Hollande did as well.
Of course they did. Yeah. Anyway, then Cynthia goes on and says, since Trump sees Venezuelan then Russian tankers as economic warfare, is the EU now doing the same? Likely, since they're too chicken and militarily weak to take Russia on directly, this lets them wage high seas warfare without deploying troops or launching missiles from land. But could the EU escalate and target Russian boats, as Trump did with Venezuela, under the guise of fighting terrorism? If the EU follows suit, this suggests the US is also too chicken and weak to take Russia on directly. Well, I think we saw in the case of Macron, the French see
Right.
a tanker, and I guess they're going to keep doing this until until there's some kind of retaliation. I mean, whether it's going to be
Well, I mean,
warships
this
or
is
whether the Russians will seize a European ship of their own. But there's no question that the Europeans are going to keep doing this as long as they think they can get away with it.
yeah. Piracy is an act of war. Okay, and so I agree with George. I mean, they will. Now we're going to have a new escalation. We'll have a tanker escalation ladder. The Europeans will relent. What they're this is a fishing expedition. This is they're probing. They're probing right
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
Okay,
Yeah,
and what will be the result? They will back down.
right. But I think
That's my prediction.
Well, it is true though that it's very hard to provide escorts for every single ship. There are lots and lots and lots of ships in the high seas, and you can't provide every one of them with a military escort. So there's always going to be an opportunity to seize more ships. So therefore, the only way, the best way of doing this, I think, is to in turn seize European ships. Because I mean that's a much easier than I think providing a military escort for I don't know how many ships that are in the high seas at any time.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah. And anyway, Mojo 1982 says the Russian authorities deliberately privatized Russian hydrocarbon telecommunications metallurgical companies so that Russians can purchase them. Had these big Russian state companies been sold in the marketplace, foreigners would have purchased them. Khodorkovsky received funding.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Khodorkovsky received funding from Lord Jacob Rothschild to buy Yukos. When he was incarcerated, Lord Jacob Rothschild was transferred ownership and control. And that was like the way they did this. It was always a scam. I mean, when they did that, when they privatized it in that way of giving the public a share, they knew perfectly well what would be the consequence. That essentially, rich crooks like Khodorkovsky or Browder would just simply snap them up. They would just buy them up for a song, and then they would become wealthy.
They literally went to these enterprises with bags of money, and they gave cash for the shares. They literally did. Okay, and the average Russian had no idea what a share of what. They didn't understand the concept. Okay, and that was intentional. And Khodorkovsky, he was already in talks to sell it to American oil majors. Okay, and that's that's how I cut my teeth in journalism. Is I wrote about the oligarch wars, Putin's war against the oligarchs, and
that's right.
I remember I got a lot of pushback because because they're saying, oh, this is a violation of private property. And I said, no, this is a violation of Russia's sovereignty, okay? Because they were going to sell the crown jewels to Texas oil men. And any leader of any country of any significance would say, no, you're not going, I'm going to interrupt these sales. You cannot do that, okay? And almost all of these companies have a state state stake in them, and that is intentional.
That's right. That's right. Anyway, there's another question here by Anne Marie, is a good friend of ours. Anne Marie says there was the report about Nord Stream by Seymour Hersh, who was saying that it was the U.S. with the help of Norway, if I remember well, who blew up the pipeline. Yeah, that was Hersh's story. Maybe I missed it, but is there any comparable report which in terms of evidence would convincingly corroborate the claim that it was Ukraine who blew up the pipeline? Well, we go by all these news stories. Is that credible? I don't find them credible. I never found it credible, the story that Ukraine was able to do it by itself.
I find it implausible. So a yacht with 4 or 5 guys, a case of beer and a buxom blonde blew up a massive infrastructure. Really? Oh, and they left their passports behind. Oh, come on. That's ridiculous.
Exactly. So, but I think it was always important that for particularly the German authorities to claim, first of all, that it was terrorism, because we talked about it for the insurance, but they couldn't very well point the finger at the United States. That would be really painful. I mean, the Germans here, hey, this is our great friend and ally, did this to us, so they can.
Yeah, you'd be cooed in a weekend. Okay.
That's right. So they point the finger at Ukraine, which of course also raises the question, well, so we're making all these sacrifices for Ukraine. Oh, but Zelensky wasn't involved. No, he wasn't involved. Though it was it was the other guy, Zaluzhny. It was all Zaluzhny. Yeah, and then they dig up some weird guy sitting in prison. Yeah, it was him. This is a massive operation. I mean, you can't just simply go in, put a stick of dynamite and just blow up, a massive enterprise like this gas pipeline. Now, this is a huge, huge thing that only something like the United States with the resources that it has could do such a thing. But it was very
and at the time they had Baltic exercises. Oh, coincidence.
right. That's right.
Some of the
right.
American naval ships turned off their transponders. Why? Come on. I mean, what is keeping us from the truth is politics. That's
Yes.
all.
That's exactly right. Anyway, Anne Marie, thank you very much for your generosity. Made a nice contribution for Buddy. So I hope Buddy, will appreciate it. He's not known to be very appreciative dog. Anyway, our time is up. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you so much for really, really interesting questions and really, really challenging and thoughtful observations. Really enjoyed them, and luckily we did it. We pulled this off. I mean, really, you're looking very sharp now, Peter. Your background is very sharp. So everything.
Yeah, it's iPhone, iPad. These things, their camera technology is really, really good. Okay, except for I'm talking to a postage stamp.
That's but anyway, thank you, everybody. We will be back for our joint live stream next time, same time next Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern time. And then please join me tomorrow for 3 p.m. Eastern time for my solo live stream. Look forward to seeing you all then. Until then, all the best.